Welcome, everybody. I got 1 o'clock. I'm Dallas Mount. I'm the owner of Ranch Management Consultants. We're the organization that puts on the Ranching for Profit School. And we're excited to have Dr. Kohl here with us today. Just a little bit of background of why we're here and why I think this is a super important topic. Yeah, I've been paying attention in the ranching world for at least the last 20 years. And I have never seen numbers like what we're seeing coming across. And I want to preface this and say, I realize not everybody, the high prices in the beef industry are not materializing to high profits for all businesses, right? Like myself and my family, we custom graze cattle in the mountains here in southeastern Wyoming, and we haven't tripled our prices on our custom graze clients, right? So even though beef prices are high, not everybody in the business of ranching is having extremely high profits. But a lot of businesses are having extremely high profits. We've got a model ranch that we work through at the Ranching for Profit School. And for the last, 6, 7 years, that ranch has been popping around. It's a model 400 cow ranch that follows a lot of the numbers that we see come through. And it's been having years when they lose 80 to 100,000. They have years when they make 80 to 100,000. From last year to this year, if we change nothing but the market price received, that business saw a $300,000 profit on their bottom line. So we're seeing some very different numbers than what we've seen before. And I really think there's some urgency in this topic today, because here we are, it's the 21st of November. Between now and the end of the year, a lot of these businesses are following the calendar year for their tax accounting. There's going to be a lot of decisions made in the name of tax avoidance that might be, for some businesses, going to be some really dumb decisions. It's going to make it very difficult for their businesses moving forward. So I don't want to see those dumb decisions happen. I'd like to see you guys, our clients, make smart decisions with deploying those profit dollars to make your businesses stronger, more profitable, more resilient into the future. So I think that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm excited to have Dr. Kohl here with us. I've seen him speak several times. He's one of my favorite people in the ag finance world to listen to. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Kohl, to give yourself an introduction, and we'll start this conversation.
Well, Dallas, it's great to be with you. I'm coming here from Virginia. I noticed K Reeser is on, former student of mine. And one of the things is I've been at Virginia Tech for a number of decades. They're officially on the faculty, but I go back in and guest lecture now. I was very, very blessed. A former student wrote a big check out and endowed a center chair in my name, and I have four former students who are professors at Virginia Tech, and so it's a lot of fun to go back, and I don't have to grade papers, and I don't have to be politically correct, and so I can kind of go in there. Originally from upstate New York, grew up on a dairy farm, uh, moved down here. But one of the things I come to you as a fellow business owner, son and I, we have a cow-calf hay operation. Actually, they're putting down poultry compost on both the hay fields and the pastures the past few days. So we're kind of stinking up the area around Virginia Tech, but we're about 10 miles on out. Our signature business is Homestead Creamery, value-added type of business. Started 25 years ago, Dallas, and it was started by a 27-year-old and a 40-year-old. I got asked to come into the business about 2.5 years later. I took my classes down to visit the business. They'd lost over $1,200,000, and so I kind of came in and kind of an unpaid consultant. But one of the things that happened was they gave me part of ownership. We got her turned around about 18 months later. And I'll be candid with you, Dallas. It was a lot of the principles we'll probably talk about today. It was the boring stuff. It was the basic stuff. And I got to tell you, here we are 25 years later, our first year in business. I think we were about 600,000 in revenue. This year we'll probably hit somewhere between 17 and 18 million. We have small dairy farms, compared to the industry of 100 cows, six of them. And we produce milk. We go just the opposite of the big companies. We're asynchronous. We produce and sell milk in the glass bottle. We have A2 milk for lactose intolerant. We're right in the middle of eggnog and custard seasons. We started it in mid-September. It'll go to December 31st. What happens at December 31st? Dallas, our sales drop dramatically because people have a New Year's resolution to lose weight. Our product's probably not conducive to losing weight. So that's a big introduction. This year I've been in 30 states. You folks from Canada, I have done a few webcasts up there. And one of the things I work very closely with RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, and doing programs over the years. And so that's a lot about me.
Cool. That's great. Thanks, Doc. So one of the comments you made that I forget where it was on, but I was listening to it on my earbuds as I was doing something. It made me stop in my tracks. And you said, I'm worried about the beef producers. The
Yep.
worst decisions are made in the best of times.
Yep.
Would you expand on that for us some?
Yeah, you know what'll happen is, of course, the grain industry is going through its, down cycle. But when you go through the up cycle, you know what'll happen? You get away from the basics. You get what I would call content that, everything is going to continue. And particularly as this beef cycle is gone, it's been elongated this time. Sometimes we take our foot off the pedal as far as business basics. And I think probably on that, and it's been very popular, I have the old famous 60-30-10 rule as far as profits. And, one of the things that I tell people, take your profits here at the end of the year. 60% of those profits go to build efficiency first, growth second. Get better before you get bigger. Get efficient before you get bigger. 30% is what I call a calculated working capital strategy. And one of the things that you've got to do during that upcycle is to build that working capital. And one of the things that will destroy that, building that working capital, in the next 40 days, we will spend $1 to save 20 cents on taxes. And what it'll do every time it eats up the working capital, but also sometimes we take on debt obligations. We'll buy equipment or, do various things to reduce the taxes. And we don't think through the unintended consequences. In Dallas, we've got to be right now, the beef industry has to be very deliberate in building and solidifying that working capital. Then the other 10%, do what you want to do with it. But unfortunately, I did a parking lot inspection the other day. I was at some livestock folks, and that 10% may have gone to 50% when I saw some of the pickups in the yard and some of the cattle trailers and different things like that. You've got to enjoy yourself. Don't get me wrong. But when the 10% becomes the 50, 60%, and it will happen during these good times. And so let me summarize again: 60, 30, 10. That should be ingrained in there. And again, get efficient before you get bigger. Better is better before bigger is better. But you got to be deliberate on building that working capital. And everybody thinks it's just cash. It can be, assets that can be turned to cash very, very quickly. And then the 10%, do what you want to do with it. Life is short out there. And so, again, that is the strategy that needs to be built in, particularly in the next 40 days. And of course, folks, you've seen what has happened in the past a few days where what feeder cattle are off 17%. And all it takes is a tweet. All it takes is something, like opening the border or different things. And, one of the concerns that I have is that, yeah, we got the screw worm south of the border. And all it takes is something like that to turn our consumer off. And then we've got an issue. And, there was an old saying, cash is king. Well, to you folks up in Canada, one of the RBC ladies pulled me aside in London, or no, it was Woodstock, Ontario. And she goes, Dr. Kohl, she goes, I want to contest you on your term cash is king. And I go, okay. And she goes, I believe cash is queen. And I says, well, okay, I'll hear you out. And she goes, you ever played chess or checkers? And believe me, I grew up in lake effect snow off Lake Ontario where you'll get a 60 inches of snow in 24-hour period. And I used to play a lot of chess and checkers with my grandparents. And if you think about the most important player on that chess, it's the queen. The queen there is to block adversity, take advantage of opportunities. So I want you to be thinking about short run and long run moves as your chessboard. And one of the things is critical. A matter of fact, a choke point. I don't care if it's the United States government or any government in the world. I don't care if it's a business or it's a household. It's not about your equity, it's about your financial liquidity. And that is going to be important in periods of high extreme volatility.
All right.
Long
Great.
lecture
That's
for
good.
short question.
Yeah, no, that was some great stuff. So I want to dig into the 60-30-10. So we're going to come back and do that. But we also talked about some pitfalls of use of profit. And you mentioned that pickup. And I was just in a conversation last week with somebody that said, I'm looking at this from a tax thing. I could go out there and let's say it's a $100,000 pickup. I could go out there and buy that $100,000 pickup, fully depreciate it today, and then finance it and pay it off into the future. And so I said, yes, you absolutely could. And maybe your business really needs that pickup to run, but maybe it doesn't. So what do you see as some pitfalls?
Yeah, and Dallas, can I come back to that pickup? You got to consider the insurance cost on that thing. You got to
Yeah.
consider the taxes on that thing. I've still got my old stick shift pickup on the farm, and I don't have to worry about those, types of angles. But oftentimes, I will see kind of the pitfalls on profit will be you've got to have balance. You got to have balance between the taxes, the balance between the working capital, and the balance between growth. And what will happen is sometimes we get our tax hat on, or we tell the accountant, uh, we've got to minimize, those taxes out there. I think another thing, you've got to look at your profit and how do you deploy it. For example, in the better is better, bigger is better strategy, can you better invest into your assets, whether it's your ranch land or grassland or your hayland or whatever it is, to get more production per acre. That's a commonly one. I got to tell you, a big one that I often will see is what we call KTs, killer toys. And
Mhm.
one of the things about the killer toys, we used to see during the good cycle, particularly in the grain cycle, people are buying helicopters. You can write them off on the taxes. And there was one beef producer had a feedlot, bought a helicopter, and I guess he just hovered over the feedlot. But you got to be careful of loading up on KTs or killer toys. But then one of the things you got to be careful of is loading up on your capital assets because what will happen is success in business is about earns and turns, turning those assets, but also having the margin. And so those are some of the elements that sometimes we don't think about the longer term implications. By the way, I kind of call it the four pillars of success, regardless of the cycle that you're in. And again, I'm writing an article on this one. Actually, got a PowerPoint on this one. The four pillars of success is can you increase your production efficiency, holding your cost in line. In other words, it's called the 5% rule. Try to be 5% better than you were last year or your peers. I know you have a number of peer teams out there. The second pillar is focusing on cost management, but you got to be real careful there. I see big companies, they know the cost of everything, the value of nothing. Can I give you an example? Boeing aircraft. They focused on the bottom line cost management, and then their door falls off their aircraft. Okay. So again, balance it out. The other big one is marketing and risk management. And that is a very, very big one on the pillars. And then I know you appreciate this one, capital efficiency. And again, what does that pickup do? What's that new piece of machinery? Now, that being said, and Kay will probably smile behind the screen here, we're looking at some capital assets, but one of the things that we're looking at capital assets is our downtime. Our son, he works out, I work out. We've got to have those assets working for us, but we're also, with me, we're looking at age-friendly assets. In other words, whether it's the working pens, the working stalls. And one of the things, I'm on the program with her, a few times a year. I was just on a program in Texas with her, um, Temple Grandin. And one of the things is where, that has worked so effectively for us. So that was a long answer. I gave you the pitfalls, but also hopefully people can take home here during the holiday period. Think about the four pillars and what are you doing to enhance those four pillars, trying to become 5% better in each one of those pillars.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. Earns and turns. I love that.
Oh,
We teach yeah.
uh-huh. Go
We
ahead.
teach gross margin ratio and turnover. So those are some things that we're following with our clients quite a bit, but they match right up with that earns and turns.
Can I share with you? I'm writing a series of articles, particularly for the grain industry. It works for livestock. What happens when you don't have all this legacy capital? You didn't inherit a lot of land, or you don't have a lot of land assets, and you're renting and leasing. Well, it's all about earns and turns. In other words, you take that net margin, that capital turnover, that gets your rate of return on asset. And there was a professor at the University of Minnesota. He's down in Purdue. He was at Iowa State. Mike Bulgy had a high-pitched voice, and he goes, "Success is all about earns and turns," and he's exactly right. And that works across businesses.
Great, great. So I want to we had a question come in. So let's move back to the 60-30-10. Let's dive into that 60 for right now. We had a question come in with a registration that said, if better is better before bigger is better, what metrics or KPIs do we want to be paying attention to before we get bigger?
One of the things you guys focus on in your program, of course, I've followed you since the beginning of your program. You focus on that net income, net margin. You've got to have that as one of your metrics. One of the ones that I look at, and I take operating expense revenue ratio. And again, I don't use the tax records because we'll manipulate those. I'll do an accrual adjustment. And what I do is take the operating expenses, take out depreciation because we'll manipulate that, and I take out interest paid, and I like to divide it into the revenue. And one of the things that I find that will get you that net margin that you can then kind of debt service, family living, capital reinvestment. Those are two powerful uh, ones that I use. And then if you've got multiple enterprises, and by the way, Dallas, I spoke at the National Ag Banker Conference here a couple of weeks ago. We're finding the most successful farm and ranch businesses south of the border and north of the border, United States and Canada, usually have about 3 to 6 different sources of revenue. So then if you have that, then you can take it even via enterprise to see what's making you money. Where do you, by the way, a business has energy, you have energy. And the key thing is to deploy that energy where you can get your biggest rate of return. So that would be two metrics that I really look at. And then, of course, that earns and turns, that capital turnover, the asset turnover. How many times are you doing it during a year? Typically, though, with our cow-calf operation, it's been a slow turnover compared to other businesses, but it doesn't have to be slow, is what I'm saying. You can really improve that type of efficiency. So those would be three metrics. Do you have others, Dallas? We'll have conversation here.
Yeah, those are great. So net margin ratio, I think that's what we call in our terms is our gross margin ratio.
Yep.
So it's essentially minus the direct costs.
Yeah.
is the net margin ratio. And then we do the asset turnover ratio, which
Uh-huh.
is what's the value of the assets in the production business. We drop the land off. We don't count the land. We're
Yep.
just looking at the production business versus the gross revenue, or gross product is the term we use, which adjusts for
Yep.
inventory. Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys have been, I follow and I have a number of people have been through your programs in my seminars. And let's put it this way, you guys are doing it right. I wish the grain industry would do it.
Thanks. I appreciate that 3 to 6 different sources of revenue. And you know what? One of the things we're seeing more and more is, and it's probably more common in the new entrants to agriculture, is
Mhm.
this desire to have, and maybe it's not a desire, but it's a feeling like they need to have 8, 10, 12, 15 things going on inside what's many times a very small farm. So you want to expand on that a bit?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that one up. Right now, our grain industry, I call it oftentimes if they're not diversified in the livestock, they're mono, single. You know what the basic thing is? You're going to see massive consolidation. They're competing against the global south, that being south of the equator. So the business is going to get bigger. But you got to be really careful. And it got our creamery into problems because they tried to have too many revenue streams. And what happened was, and I'll just give you an example. We went in and did a cost analysis when I came back in. For every dollar worth of yogurt we were selling, it was costing us $1.66. I go back to the management team and the owners. I said, I think we ought to drop yogurt. And you know what? One of the owners said, oh, we've known that all along. But until they actually had seen the economics and how much they were losing, and one of the owners liked yogurt. And so sometimes your personal biases will come in there. And so you got to be really careful. And when you look at enterprises, and it could be inside or outside of agriculture, how does it line up with your resources? How does it line up with the marketplace? You know, you talk about young and beginning farmers and ranchers. I do probably 12 to 15 of those programs. I was just out in California doing one. And the thing is, uh, I'm seeing the younger farmers and ranchers have this diversified income source, and they will have outside gigs. It might be a consultant, they might sell livestock insurance or crop insurance. And you know what they'll tell me? It's not only the revenue, but it's being out there networking, getting them out of your silo. And I think that's very important. So there's both monetary and non-monetary, but be very careful of having too many streams because what'll happen is it'll give you unfocused energy.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So 60% into efficiency and growth.
Uh-huh.
So what one of the terms we've been using around this is I want to see that capital being deployed to make your business more profitable and more resilient. And a term I heard one of my colleagues use is, I want, if you're going to spend money now to avoid taxes today, it better make the problem worse next year, right? Make your business more
Good.
profitable. So that
Boy,
tax problem is going to be bigger next year. What are your
great
thoughts?
comment. Great comment. Yeah. And for example, as you invest in that growth and oftentimes people say, well, that's more acreage or more cattle. Well, sometimes it's the same acreage, but you're doing things there to improve that productivity, right? And trying to get more pounds, et cetera, on out there. And so it doesn't always have to be equate to bigger numbers. But boy, whoever told you that you want to have even more of a tax problem next year, and boy, it's tough to swallow. My associate Alicia and I uh, will kind of keep a balance, counterbalance, and I go, oh, I got to pay. Well, she'll remind me of what I say. Very few businesses ever go broke paying income tax.
Yep, yep, good. Here's a timely question from Jack. Please explain 3 to 6 sources of revenue versus Jim Collins's hedgehog concept that allocating money to the most profitable enterprise. So he thought the 3 to 6 sounded like too many.
Well, no, I agree. In other words, you could have 3 to 6, but they've got to make money. It's the hedgehog type of principle, and again, that gives you that plan B or C. And so I'm not against that principle at all. But one of the things is if you're going enterprise 3 through 6, uh, is it still making you money? And what's the marginal revenue versus the marginal cost, going back to economics on that. So it does incorporate the hedgehog type of principle. But what you got to be really careful of, you can get too many of them, and then your energy gets dispersed, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't do a good job on the other enterprises.
Yeah, good, good. Okay, let's move to 30% into improving working capital. So,
Yeah.
and I'm going to take a stab at defining working capital for the listeners, and then I want you to correct me if you see it different. What we say is, so we're going to do the definition of working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. So current assets, think of that as things you could turn into cash pretty quick, or it is cash, right? So if you got yourself in a jam and you needed to come up with cash in, let's say it's 2 weeks, right? What could you have turned into cash fairly quickly? So that would be grain in the bin, calves that are weaned, just waiting to be hauled to
Yep.
town, coal cows, right? So it is going to be your checking account, your savings account,
Mhm.
those kind of things. So that's my current assets minus my current liabilities. And this is money I owe somebody fairly quickly. So maybe I've got a feed bill sitting at the co-op I haven't paid yet. I've got
Mhm.
a credit card bill. I've got my land payment that's coming up here at the end of the year that I'm getting ready to write that check for. That's going to be in my current liabilities as well. So I take my current assets minus my current liabilities. What's left is my working capital. And
Mhm.
I've thought about it too as like the runway in front of you, right? How much room do I have in front of myself to maneuver, get myself through a tough time, through a jam, or take advantage of an opportunity that maybe I don't have to spend the time pulling the money together for. I can just seize on it and figure it out later.
Mhm.
So, what do you think? Is that a good
No,
definition of working
no,
capital?
you're exactly current assets minus current liabilities. Now, your banker out here, or Farm Credit or FSA, will oftentimes use the current ratio. I do not like. It's an internal metric. You know what? We use at the creamery and we use it at the farm. We will take that working capital, current assets minus current liabilities, and divide it into expenses, not revenue, into expenses. And I was one of the founders of the Farm Financial Standards here in the United States, and they put revenue in there, but I like expenses. And you know what it basically says? For example, our creamery is about 27% right now. That means we can operate 90 days
Yeah.
on our money, not the bank's money, et cetera, et cetera. I saw your metric out there, and I would agree with your metric, but this beef industry right now, in the upcycle it's in, your working capital to expenses needs to be headed north.
All
And
right.
the other element, and you've hit it very succinctly, I like to look at and examine how much is cash of that working capital. And we'll kind of keep about a quarter of our working capital. Of course, we have receivables, inventories, and we have some prepaids in cash. And boy, that cash can be deployed. I'll just give an example. One of the companies came to us last year and they said, "Hey, we'll give you a big cash discount if you'll buy the ingredients for eggnog and custard at this time of the year." Well, that changed our whole cost of production dynamics and it made our eggnog and custard extremely, profitable out there. And what I like to do, I like to look at my current assets, current liabilities, 3 months and under. Okay. Those are the immediate. Then I like to kind of look at 3 to 6 months. That's kind of my intermediate, and then 6 months and longer. And that will kind of give you that sense of urgency. And one of the things, for example, we got a load of cattle going out of here at 7 tomorrow morning. I got to go sort here this afternoon. And I heard my son say, "Well, I got a tractor payment coming up." That's a classic example right there. And and again, so I like to even break them down a little bit more on that top half of that balance sheet out there. And I got to tell you, Dallas, if you don't have a lot of legacy capital or a lot of land equity, which my young farmers and ranchers have, I like to keep that working capital expenses even higher because I'll make you an analogy. It's about like football, not soccer. If you really think about it, your profits and your cash flows, your defensive line, your linebackers is your working capital. It's the backup when it's not there. And then your safeties and cornerbacks is your collateral or your land equity. If you don't have good safeties and cornerbacks, you better have a good set of backers,
I love
linebackers out
that.
there, and
That's
not the steroid pussycats that we have out there today, real linebackers. And I noticed Lynn was kind of smiling out there. I go back to Dick Buckus days and Ray Nitschke and those guys. And Matt, you were kind of smiling out there, but I got to put some humor in there. But it's a very imperative that you look at your debt levels and the land legacy capital there because boy, your fallback position is going to be that working capital on out there. And I like your metric. Dallas, you might kind of indicate I have green light, yellow light, red light. My green light is above 25%. Super green would be above 40%. My yellow light will be 10 to 25, kind of an amber caution light. And boy, the red light area, when she's less than 10%, you're very vulnerable, very vulnerable. Your linebackers are very vulnerable to, volatility or if we have a hiccup in the business, et cetera, et cetera.
great. Great. I love the linebacker analogy. I'm surprised it wasn't a basketball one,
Well,
knowing
I
you had seen
know
the picture behind
but I can't
it.
use it because Steph Curry screwed it all up with his three-pointer. No, I'm joking.
Okay.
Uh,
Hey, let me ask you one more on that one. So we'll have people that are saying, okay, Dallas, yeah, I get this current asset stuff. Here I am sitting at the end of the year. I got very little cash sitting in my checking or savings, but I've only drawn $100,000 out of my
mhm.
operating, and the
Yeah,
bank says I can go up to 300,000. So,
yeah.
so that's working capital, right? What would you say to that?
I get you got to be careful. And Dallas, you sent those questions out, and I actually thought about them when I was feeding cattle this morning. You got to be careful on those lines of credit. Yes, it is potentially working capital, but things can happen at the bank or farm credit. For example, all of a sudden they could tighten down on credit. In other words, your 300,000 might be 200, and that's happening over in the grain industry, by the way. And so you got to be real careful. You could lose your relationship officer, and then all of a sudden, something, or the bank or the lender merges, and the new organization goes, I'm not going to finance agriculture, or I'm not going to finance beef because the price of mama cows is $4,000 and it's only going to drop. So you got to be real careful. You can use it, but also the caveat is conditions can change with your lender. And that's why you've got to have a relationship lender that understands your industry, your business, etc. Yeah, you could get a lower interest rate with someone else, but do they really understand it, Dallas? And I'm a big believer of return on relationship. Because if you got return on relationship, you don't have to worry about return on asset, return on equity. So be careful on those lines of credit because I've seen them turn upside down very, very quickly. And I got to tell you, Dallas, 32% of all operating money now extended in U.S. agriculture is a non-traditional lender, up from 16%. And that would be like your seed and fertilizer companies, et cetera, et cetera. What we're noticing amongst them, they're tightening up on credit, hoping that our traditional lenders like the banks or farm credit will refinance. And boy, we're going to see some real interesting renewal negotiations in the next 120 days. So be
Oh,
careful.
yeah.
And I hope my bankers out here that I've worked with in Farm Credit, I'm not being derogatory, but things do happen. So make sure you have your self liquidity as well, a nice balance. Okay,
Great.
Dallas?
Love it. Love it. I appreciate that answer because we get pushed back a lot on that of people saying, well, that cash is just cash sitting in the bank. It's not doing
Oh,
anything to me. I don't need to
oh,
keep it. Yeah.
Dallas. Yeah, it might be. I just met with my financial advisor and I've got cash. I'm an old fogey, so I'm keeping more cash around. And one of the things is that cash may not be earning you a whole lot, but I can tell you when I've bought farms and acquired assets, I was glad I had the cash because I was able to buy them on a discount. In other words, oftentimes people don't take that. And I've been Warren Buffett's deal here the past couple of years, and I meet with a bunch of venture capitalists from around the world 2 days prior. But when I was sitting on the floor with Warren Buffett 2 years ago, he had 138 billion in cash. This year he had 360 billion in cash. I know exactly what he's doing. He's basically building up his cash reserves so that queen can go out there and take advantage of that. Remember in marketing in beef or grain, it's about the marketplace out there and being able to pounce on out there, given good financial organization and cost dynamics so you don't get too emotional.
Love it, man. People on the call, I want to hear from you guys in 2 and 3 years from now. If you've developed a discipline to do what Dr. Cole's talking about here, the kind of
Can,
opportunities that are going to be out there. Yeah.
and can I just tell you, it takes that discipline and it's the boring stuff. And one of the things, the things that you teach are kind of the boring, it's not glamorous. And Dallas, as I told a group in Albany, New York this week, everybody's looking for the next magic silver bullet. There's no next magic silver bullet. It's block and tackle, the four pillars. Focus on those. And is it going to guarantee success? No, but it'll put the odds in your favor.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good.
Yeah, and
There was,
I know people are going to disagree, but that's okay. Uh, agree to disagree. But again, as I see this future kind of coming with tariffs and sanctions and all this, volatility requires financial liquidity.
yeah. Good. Good. You call what we're doing is boring. I think it's exciting, man.
No, I think I'm a geek. No, I am a geek. And by the way, every Tuesday or Wednesday night, I got to make sure I get the financials from the creamery. We do weekly cash flows. We have been doing them for the past 4 or 5 years. One of our best management practices. And I can hear somebody from Montana. Well, that's good, Cole. I only get a revenue source once a year, but your expenses are throughout the year. And I actually had a rancher kind of contest on that. And he kind of goes, he shook his head, but he's still probably doing annual cash flow.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Hey, there was a question that lines up pretty good about where we are now, and maybe you've covered it. Maybe you got something else to add. The question is, what have been the best strategies you've seen implemented to use profits from high prices to maintain capital and liquidity?
Tell you the best practice, I'll honestly, it's the simple old projected cash flow that you monitor. And it's 80% of a business plan because you got to think through your production, your timing, you got to think through cost, your debt service, your family living withdrawals. And I got to tell you, a good spreadsheet and then having financial sensitivity analysis to establish your guardrails, to then kind of look at your tolerance for risk, whether you should have a risk management type of program or, some of the crop insurances, et cetera. I got to tell you, that cash flow helps you not only communicate to the banker or farm credit, and oftentimes I'll hear farmers and ranchers, well, I got to fill out my balance sheet and cash flow for the banker or farm credit. And I had a producer the other day, there was two of them together. And I go to the producer, or the other producer goes to the producer, well, do you use it in the management of the business? And there was a dull stare. Basically, he doesn't. Folks, I got to tell you, those financial statements, and I got to tell you another thing, Dallas. With that cash flow plan, you better have an operating plan to back it up. In other words, what's your production plan? What's your, cost management plan? We're putting down poultry compost, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, what is your, human resource plan? Who are you going to pay? Are you going to have CapEx? I find that cash flow is 80% of a business plan.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Love it. Love it. One of the basics there, back to basics that you're talking about that we're starting to see violated, and it concerns me a bit, is the number of full-time employees you're asking a business to support, right? And when we're seeing times like this, it's really easy to get on the phone and say, hey, Junior, move back home. The business can finally support you, right? And then we see these businesses that have too many mouths at the trough and not enough income to support them. So what do
Yeah.
have you seen that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, at the National Ag Banker Conference, we discussed it. And listen to this, I'm doing a banking school in Kansas, Nebraska, Kansas school. And you know what one of the young bankers says? Well, we have to have 125% coverage ratio, uh, you know, to make the loan. And then you know what he said? We waved the magic wand on family living costs to make the 125% work. I go,
Uh,
oh my God. But here's a big thing that's going on family living costs. Um, Actually, the FinBin data just said it was 76,000 the other day at the conference, and you say that's a lot of money. Put it on a monthly basis, and boy, it doesn't take long to eat it up. And what I'm finding is insurance is going up. Think about this in Nebraska, the insurance going up and your real estate taxes is almost half of a typical mortgage on a home. And so we've seen all that creep, but then you've got childcare, adult care. Many of you on this podcast today, you have to take care of both sides. And it's very, very stressful. But the big one, Dallas, that I'm seeing is the number of families withdrawing from the business. You got grandpa and grandma, mom and dad, junior and juniorette, and then you got the kid that lives home in the basement and maybe with a significant other. Those are all withdrawals. And Dallas, you know what? One of the things that's full transparency is critical because we find 29% of family living expenses are in the farm expenses. And I'll give you an example. Grandma and grandpa go to Arizona in the winter, uh, or Florida or wherever it is. They keep the cell phones. They're on the insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And this commingling of expenses is a big deal. And this is why grandpa and grandma, mom and dad don't want to give up the farm because they give up all the perks. And I'm picking on the older generation. I'm sorry, Jack, you're on here. I'm sorry about that. But one of the things, the vintage generation, I shouldn't say old, I'll have to go to sensitivity school. But one of the things that's real interesting is uh, we don't take this into account. Here's another one. And Kay, who was on there, I used to have my classes at Vatech, and the youngsters are going to go back to the farm. I says, well, how much are you going to? Oh, we're going to add 25 mama cows and 100 acres. There's no way it's going to cover it. But you know what they say? Well, I'm single. Well, let's put it this way, being single and about 3 years later, they're married, that changes the whole dynamic. And so, family, think about this, Dallas. Of the refinances, about 40 to 45% of all operating lines of credit that have to be refinanced is due to family living. In other
mm,
words, we don't realize how much it's costing us today. And believe me, inflation is definitely there.
yeah. Yeah. I was surprised that 76,000 was as low as it is. If we
Well,
ferreted out all the ways family living was into the business, that would probably easy be over 100,000, I bet, huh?
Dallas, the Nebraska, and I follow their records very closely. They're up there north of 100,000. And Dallas, let me give you a perspective. And again, I'm a geek. In 2005, that was 50,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it doubles out there. And oh, I'll hear grandma and grandpa say, "Wow, we lived on, 15, 20,000." But things have changed, and I call it the Corvette rule. Generally speaking, the family living cost will follow the price of a new Corvette. In 1967, a new Corvette cost you 44.95. Family living was about 4,500. 88, it's 2220. The vets are getting expensive these days, but family living costs. And so what I tell farm families Every family is a Corvette.
Wow. I'm picturing all these vintage generation people driving around in their Corvettes now. So you
Yeah,
got,
on Route 66 that no longer exists.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
All right, I know there's some questions hanging out there and we're going to get to them. I want to move to the 10%. 10% to
yeah.
enjoy, is that, um, expand on that for us with you.
Yeah, and you know what it is? Also investing off the farm business. That's that diversification. Now let's go to Manitoba. I'm up there doing a seminar, and one of the Canadian producers got after me. He says, "Well, I know Manitoba farm ground a lot better than I do Bay Street investing or Wall Street investing." And I says, yeah, that's an accurate statement. And I says, sir, would you invest all your money in one asset? Well, of course not. And he said, kind of like that. I says, well, if you just buy land, you're investing in one asset. And it really got him kind of thinking. But here's one of the things I appreciate. And I'll tell you, my favorite country, I'll just say it's my favorite country is Canada. And no, and I'm not trying to win all the Canadians over there, but one of the things is a number of years ago, working with RBC, they said to be successful in transition, the senior generation needs to have about 50% of their retirement needs. In other words, how much you take your family living costs in retirement needs to come from outside investments and Social Security, et cetera, et cetera. And boy, I find that is very, very critical because, in other words, it allows for that next generation, they don't have to buy it out all at once, particularly if there's land legacy. So that 10% needs to be deliberate in an investment plan. And again, I'm not a financial planner, but I can tell you, my financial planner met with me this morning. He says, boy, two or three of your stocks have done very, very well. And I'm not going to name them, but one's a railroad stock and another is a farm machinery company. And again, it's called diversification on out there. And then Dallas, I had a spouse come up to me and she goes, "Well, my husband, he was a younger farmer and rancher, wants to take money out of the 401k and invest in farmland." I says, "No, no, no, don't do that." And you got to remember, any money that goes in those accounts cannot be called on a lawsuit or bankruptcy.
Mm, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And it
All
might
right.
be a little different up in Canada, and I apologize. But I know it is here in the States.
Good, good. We think of that 10% to enjoy and invest. A lot of people harp on us and say, "Oh, we're anti-machinery, we're anti-stuff,"
No.
and I'm like, that's not true. And I think too that these are the times when, hey, let's buy some stuff to make our work easier. Let's buy some stuff that we enjoy. But you got to be disciplined in how it's done, right? And
Dallas, some of the best investment was our cattle chutes that we put in. And then Temple Grandin actually designed our facilities. I mean, when I'm working those cattle tonight, I can pretty well do it myself. And it's age friendly.
yeah.
So that was one of the best investments that we ever made.
Yeah, great. So here's a question that goes right along with that. They said we got an old feed wagon that still works for our needs, but now we have the funds. Should we be buying a different one?
I saw that question and guess what? We had the same situation here last year. We bought the piece of machinery, and you know why? And what you have to say is, okay, is that piece, that feed wagon real critical for your efficiency? Are you a good mechanic? Can you continue to repair? And what's going to be the repair cost? You'll have to ask that. But one of the things with my son and I, where he's traveling, I'm traveling, we got to have that equipment that works and works real well. And plus, we're selling more and more direct to consumer. Well, the cattle tomorrow go into a feedlot direct to consumer. So that quality of that beef, et cetera, is very, very critical. So in that line, and then tax considerations is down there and eating up the cash flow. those are some of the elements that you would have to use in analyzing that decision. That was a great question. I saw it coming
Yeah.
there. We were there 12 months ago.
All right, great. So here's one in the chat. It asks, can you comment on the economics and the rationale of expanding a cow herd or backgrounding enterprise or finishing enterprise in the current environment? I assume they're talking about, it's high prices. So
Yeah.
so retaining and buying in.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you, that was a big question, particularly we had quite a few bankers from Montana, Wyoming, western part of the United States. These cattle are expensive, and I think one of the things that you have to do is to kind of say, okay, we aren't in here flipping them. Is it going to be out there for the long run, to build it, build up our herd, fully realizing that, we could see a correction of 20 or 30% out there, but the correction can occur if you don't have to sell them there. And the other thing is, are you improving on the quality, et cetera, et cetera? She's a tough one right now. And for example, buying some of these cattle, the person that's going to go to is a former student of mine tomorrow. And we've talked, he's a veterinarian. We talked it while we were AIing cows this spring. Do you have the risk management program in place that would take care of some of that downside risk or allow you to gain that upside opportunity? I got to tell you, Dallas, people ask me about the beef industry. Well, yeah, cattle numbers are down, but actually our production's about the same because we have a bigger animal. Now, you know what the other thing that's contributing to our cycle? Old fogies like me, we're getting out of the cow-calf herd. We'll go to stocker cattle that's, age friendly. But the big trend, boy, last year at the pre-Buffett conference, we had a bunch of medical doctors, and you can feel it. And I'm not being RFK here, but boy, you can see the movement from carb to protein. And, the ratio right now to move back to 1 to 1. And what's happening is your animals on 4 legs, cattle, pork, most dense protein, followed by the chicken, then followed by the fish. You're definitely feeling that trend occur. And by the way, it's interesting. I was just did a PowerPoint today. People over $100,000 in income, they want high protein, fresh, low sugar, low carbs. And so the point I'm trying to get across, you're buying these cattle, we're on a trend. Uh, One of the things is this trend is going to continue unless we have an issue while you had your Argentine, beef coming in, or if the screwworm changes consumer perception, that
Mm.
is where you would get a market, upside down. But the dynamics out there say that this cycle should be a little bit longer. It's interesting, Dallas. We had a number of dairy producers I've been with. Right now, dairy beef is worth $2.50 to $3 a hundredweight of milk. Right now, our dairy farmers aren't making a whole lot of money. They're making enough dairy beef. I was on a farm in upstate New York. It was $2.84. So those dynamics would say, yeah, you can purchase, but if you purchase those stockers, make sure you got some risk mitigation in there. And if you don't have risk mitigation, make sure you got some working capital.
Yeah, great, good. We got 5 minutes left, so we got time for maybe
Yeah.
one or two more. I see Jen asked a question, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to open a bit broader. So let's talk about education. In my mind, that 60% was about making your business better, and I
Mhm.
think education fits that. Jen's question specifically was ranching for profit's a great tool to get your handle on the ranching business. Dr. Kohl, do you have recommendations for a farming type program?
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, part of that 60% is a deliberate educational program. And I go back to school. Actually, going to Buffett's pre-conference is like going back to school for me. But I'm blessed. I get to hear other speakers on the road. But one of the things that I will recommend, and boy, Dave Pratt, yeah, I go way back on this program, and I'm very let's put it this way. I'm very passionate about it. I've seen people go through this program. Let's put it this way. You'll get a $50 return for every dollar you invest in this program. Another program that I highly recommend is the TPAP program, the Texas Agriculture Executive Program down in Texas every year. I think we're in our 33rd. I'm the last of the remaining instructors. Others have passed away, but it's expensive. But you get to be around not the biggest, but what I call lifelong learners. They want to better themselves, and they'll come from last year. I think we had 24 states, six Canadian provinces. We had Australia, and it's that networking, it's that engagement. Investing in that, I think, is a great, great investment. Of course, there's other programs around the United States. I got to give a shout out to some of the banks and Farm Credit. They're offering some very good educational programs. I was just in Billings the other day, down Pasco, Kennewick, and over in Fresno. Uh, that's one of the things I really look for. Does a lender invest back into its customer? And if they do, you better go.
Yep.
No,
Yep. Wonderful.
you've got to be deliberate on your education. Can I tell you a best practice that we use? If the Homestead employees go to a conference, we took them to a Peyton Manning deal. They've got to come back with a summary to be distributed on out there. So, I think education, I'm worried a little bit about our educational systems, to be very candid with you. And I had some great questions in Albany, but one of the things is, take a youngster. Oh, in Albany, I had three or four people, the parents, they'd seen me before. They brought their youngsters anywhere from 12 to 15. You know why? You are what you were when you were when. A lot of your life skills in finance and business occur between 4 and 16 years of age. And one of the things is I'm a big supporter of 4-H and FFA and also the manners programs. And I'm going to look at everybody in the camera here on a Friday before Thanksgiving, or U.S. Thanksgiving. Success in life is not a score on a standardized test. It's about life skills. And boy, those organizations teach life skills. And so I'm very, very, well, you can tell I'm a little bit passionate toward those organizations. And so make sure you bring some youth. And if you're grandparents, boy, I was in Fargo this summer. A lot of the grandparents brought the grandkids.
Yep. Yep. Good. Well, this kind of goes along with that same line. We'll let this be our last question and ask you for some summary comments. But asking about the succession piece. Question is, how do we use the extra profits to retire in 10 years while transitioning the ranch to the next generation? So thoughts
That's
on
where
transition.
that's where you got to be deliberate on putting some money aside for those family living needs. And you got to be thinking about long-term health care insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just find you got to be real deliberate on your profits now for 10 years from now. And that will compound out there. And it just gives you that flexibility on the transition management. And remember, on transition management, there's a estate plan, but then there's a transition plan. And one of the things that I would tell you, the toughest part is the transition plan. Our creamery went through it. Took us 2 years. And boy, it was tough because I had to sign, and boy, my hand was shaking because I was giving up control. It's easier to build a business than it is to transfer a business, believe it or not. So deliberate investment so that you've got the other sources of revenue. And I'll just leave it, and this will be another great podcast. You can't treat all children equal. If you try to do it, you'll destroy the business. Ooh,
Yeah.
that'll
Yeah.
be
Ooh.
fuel for another podcast.
All right. It sounds good. Okay. 60-30-10, 60% back in the business for efficiency first, then growth, 30% to improve working capital, 10% do what you want with it. Enjoy it,
Yep.
invest it. Any final thoughts, Dr. Kohl, as we wrap up?
No, no. And can I hit the four pillars again?
Absolutely.
Got to be 5% better in production management, cost efficiencies, marketing and risk management, and capital efficiencies. We call it the four pillars. It's the block and tackle. And remember, for some of you out there without a lot of legacy capital, land, cetera, et cetera. Remember, those working capital reserves are your linebackers. And one of the things is those reserves have got to be a little bit higher. And just to finalize, um, success can be measured in dollar signs, but significance is giving back to others. And remember, quick money builds ego. Slow, steady, discipline builds what? Resiliency, nimbleness, and agility. And right now, there's too many people looking for quick money, particularly in the beef industry, but I see it in the sports industry, et cetera, et cetera. And so, hey, folks, great. We've had people from Mexico, Canada, United, and I'm just going to state right up front, whether you guys like it or not, I'm a big believer of North American strong. You take the three countries, we're 5% of the world population, 29% of the world economy. And one of the things is integrated. And here's what's going to happen as you go to 2030. We aren't going to be competing as a country. We're going to be competing as a block economy. North America, Asia, Europe, global South. And so I'm a big believer of North American strong. I know there's some people that don't like that, but that's just my stance. And I just did, Dallas. I did a SWOT analysis of the United States, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We found out nobody's ever done one. And actually, that's going to be my theme of my talks in 2026 as we move on to the second quarter of the 21st century.
Excellent. Excellent. Gosh, well, thank you so much for your time today,
Oh,
Dr. Kohl.
thank you. Thanks for everybody being on. I, I
100%.
I'm humbled on a Friday afternoon. I got to go sort cattle, get ready to move them on out at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. And
So are you the in and buy gate guy, or are you the guy calling in and buy? What's your role?
let's put it this way. It depends on my personality on that morning.
Okay.
Alicia's kind of smiling here, but you'll have to ask my son for the answer on that one.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks for being
thank
on
you,
with us.
everybody.